What if the person society ignored was the one destined to save it? In a city where no one looks twice at the homeless, a single mother kneels to help a crying child, unaware that his billionaire father is watching. What happens next? It doesn't just change her life. It forces a CEO to confront everything he thought he knew about power, privilege, and the cost of turning a blind eye. This is not just a story about kindness. It's about systems built on silence, and the woman who risked everything to expose them. It's about a handkerchief that wiped away more than a scraped knee. It wiped away excuses. In today's cinematic story, you'll follow the journey of a woman forgotten by the world, who dared to rewrite the rules of the boardroom from the sidewalk up. If you care about second chances, about justice, or simply want to believe that change is still possible, this is the video you need to watch until the very end. This is the Handkerchief Project, and it starts with a child's tear and a woman who refused to look away. Blood ran down the boy's knee, bright against the gray pavement of a Manhattan sidewalk. He sat alone, crying softly, his sobs drowned by the endless noise of the city, honking horns, hurried footsteps, and the indifference of a million strangers. No one stopped. No one looked. To most passersby, he was just another background detail in New York's daily chaos. But to one person, he was everything. Ava Brooks hadn't eaten in 2 days. Her stomach felt like a hollow drum, echoing with emptiness. Her coat was thin, her shoes soaked. But when she heard the boy cry, she didn't hesitate. She approached slowly, careful not to startle him. "Hey, little guy," she said gently. "Let me take a look at that." The boy sniffled but didn't move away. Ava knelt beside him. Her hands, dark-skinned, rough from sleeping on concrete, reached into her pocket and pulled out something surprisingly clean. A white handkerchief. Her only one. Without a word, she dabbed the blood, tied the boy's shoelace, and checked the scrape like someone who used to do this for a living. A few feet away, a man watched, motionless, hidden behind a pair of expensive sunglasses and a $5,000 leather briefcase clenched tightly in his hand. Ethan Caldwell, billionaire CEO of Caldwell Enterprises, father to the crying boy, had just witnessed something that made his world tilt. His son, Liam, had slipped away while Ethan was distracted. And now, a homeless woman was touching him. Ethan's first instinct was to intervene, to pull his son away. But something about the scene stopped him. The woman wasn't dangerous. In fact, Liam had stopped crying the moment she touched him. "What happened, champ?" Ava asked softly, as if the boy were her own. "I just wanted to see the birds," Liam whispered, pointing toward a flock of pigeons fighting over crumbs. Ava smiled. Not the smile of someone looking for praise or pity. A real smile. Unexpectedly. Warm, disarming. "My name's Ava," she said. "I'm Liam." Behind them, Ethan didn't move. Usually, his security team would have removed anyone who came within 10 feet of Liam. But today, he had sent them away, wanting one rare afternoon, alone with his son. As Ava finished tying Liam's shoe, the boy looked up innocently and asked, "Why are you so dirty?" The words hit the air like a slap. Ethan's face flushed with embarrassment, ready to step in. But Ava simply answered, calmly and without shame, "Because not everyone gets lucky in life, little one. No bitterness, no self-pity, just truth. Sometimes, we lose our home, our job, our family," she continued, standing up slowly. "But we don't lose our humanity. Remember that." And in that moment, Ethan Caldwell, a man who once said in a board meeting that homelessness is a choice, stood, frozen, silenced not by data, not by protest, but by the quiet courage of a woman the world had chosen not to see. The rain came that night like it always did, cold, merciless, and loud. Ava Brooks curled beneath a service entrance awning behind a closed restaurant, her body wrapped in a plastic poncho someone had thrown away. Sleep never came easy. Not when every shadow might be danger. Not when your stomach growled so loud it sounded like thunder. She clutched her backpack, her only possession. Inside were 2 changes of clothes, a cracked phone without a SIM card, and one item she guarded like treasure, a folder holding the resume she'd printed years ago. It was stained now, faded, but still legible. Bachelor's degree in business. 3 years as an HR associate. Volunteer work. Clean record. But none of that had mattered. 3 years ago, she had walked into the corporate offices of Caldwell Enterprises for a job interview. She wore her best thrift store blazer, straightened her hair, spent her last $10 on makeup. She'd made it to the final round. And then, Daniel Foster had walked into the room. "Your qualifications are impressive," he'd said with a smile. That didn't reach his eyes. "But I'm afraid you just don't fit the company image." That phrase had echoed in her mind every day since. Fit the image. Not the skills. Not the experience. The image. 3 months later, she'd lost her apartment. 6 months in, she stopped correcting people who assumed she was an addict. A year in, no one asked anymore. But what haunted her most wasn't what she lost. It was that she was never given a chance. The next morning, soaked but determined, Ava made her way to the address scribbled on the card a kind-eyed social worker named Jeremiah Stone had given her the day before. "The Ramico Foundation is hiring people with lived experience," he had told her. "They're building something real, and they need people who understand the street because they've been there." When she entered the sleek office building, the receptionist barely looked up. Her eyes flicked once at Ava's wet clothes and disheveled hair before returning to her screen. "Can I help you?" she asked coldly. I'm here about the community outreach position. Marcus Williams referred me." The woman's face curled with quiet disdain. "Are you sure you're in the right place?" Before Ava could respond, a second voice cut through the room. Sharp, confident, and warm. "She's exactly where she's supposed to be." Nina Carter, executive director of Ramico Foundation, stood tall in a burgundy blazer, hand extended, eyes steady. Ava hesitated, then shook it. In Nina's modest office, no marble floors, no curated art, she offered Ava tea and listened. Really listened. "Our mission," Nina explained, "is not just to get people off the streets. It's to expose why they ended up there in the first place." Ava blinked. "You mean the system?" "Exactly," Nina nodded. "We're working on a campaign targeting corporate hypocrisy. Ever heard of Caldwell Enterprises?" Ava froze. I've heard of them." Nina slid a thick folder across the table. "Our research shows they're investing in urban redevelopment. Projects that quietly displace vulnerable communities. Their diversity programs look good on paper, but behind closed doors it's a different story." And then she said the name. Daniel Foster, their director of diversity. The face of inclusion, the man who had erased her with a smile. "We're looking for someone who's seen both sides," Nina said. "Someone who's lived it, someone who can speak the language of the street and the boardroom." Ava stared down at her hands, rough, cold, trembling. "Why me?" Nina smiled. "Because you didn't fold. You survived. You kept your resume. You still believe someone might care." Ava didn't tell Nina about the boy on the sidewalk, about Liam, about Ethan Caldwell watching from the shadows. Some instinct told her to hold that card for now. Over the next few weeks, Ava buried herself in research. Every morning she walked miles collecting testimonials. Single mothers evicted after development projects, ex-veterans denied jobs due to cultural mismatch, families priced out of neighborhoods they'd lived in for decades. Every story fed her fire, but there was something strange. She began noticing a black SUV parked near wherever she went. Once, she turned down a side alley, only to see the same vehicle minutes later at the next block. No plates, tinted windows. Someone was watching her. And in his penthouse office overlooking the city, Ethan Caldwell sat in silence, reviewing the very same research. The faces, the patterns, the pain, and her. Her name had appeared again and again in reports from his internal investigators. Ava Brooks, former applicant, Current activist. The woman who had helped his son while he stood frozen. He stared at the image on his screen, her kneeling by Liam, pressing that handkerchief to his scraped knee, and felt something he hadn't in years: shame and curiosity. "Did you find her yet, Daddy?" Liam asked, running into the room with a toy plane. "Not yet, champ," Ethan said quietly, eyes still on the screen. "But I'm getting close." The grand auditorium of Caldwell Enterprises gleamed with polished marble, gold-accented lighting, and air thick with self-congratulation. Executives filled every row, sipping imported coffee and adjusting name tags that read Diversity and Inclusion, Conference 2024. Banners hung from the ceiling, Innovation through Equity. Together we rise, phrases crafted by marketing teams, not by lived experience. And at the front of it all stood Daniel Foster, flawlessly tailored, microphone clipped to his lapel. As Director of Diversity and Inclusion, Daniel said, voice smooth, "I'm proud to announce that in the past year alone, we've increased minority hiring by 75%. Applause thundered. Charts appeared behind him, graphs, infographics, percentages. Picture-perfect progress. No one noticed the woman in the back row, composed, quiet, wearing a borrowed blazer and holding a tiny recording device in her lap. Ava Brooks. Her heart pounded beneath her ribs. She wasn't here just to listen. She was here to expose everything. From her seat, she glanced at Nina Carter, sitting 2 rows ahead, giving a small nod. This was the moment. As Daniel wrapped his speech, he smiled and gestured toward the panel area. "And now, we welcome our partner organizations to speak about our shared commitment to social inclusion." One by one, the representatives walked up, until Ava stood. Daniel's smile faltered. For half a second, his eyes locked with hers. Panic flickered, fast but visible. Then he recovered. "Welcome," he said, voice tightening. "Let's begin with introductions." Ava stepped forward. "My name is Ava Brooks," she said clearly. 3 years ago, I applied for a position in Caldwell's HR department. Silence. "This wasn't part of the script," someone whispered. "Checker. The time I was told by Mr. Foster that I didn't fit the company image," Ava continued. 3 months later, I lost my home. 6 months later, I was sleeping under bridges." Daniel coughed. "Perhaps we're getting off topic." Ava didn't flinch. "I kept a journal," she said, lifting a small notebook, "of every interview, every rejection, every coded word. Mostly directed at Black and Latino candidates with excellent resumes but the wrong cultural fit." Murmurs filled the room. She pressed a button on her phone. Behind her, the massive screen flickered, and a video clip began to play. "In Yuan. It," Daniel Foster laughed during a recorded meeting. "Of course we need diversity," he joked. "Put it in the brochures, not the boardroom." Another clip followed. "Fill the entry levels with color to hit quotas, keep the top layers looking sharp." Gasps, whispers. A woman in the front row covered her mouth. "That's completely out of context," Daniel snapped. "I have the full recordings," Ava said calmly, "and emails, and HR evaluations. 89% of qualified Black candidates were rejected with vague phrases like, didn't project the right presence." Now the screen showed excerpts from internal evaluations, emails with highlighted phrases, spreadsheets with clear racial disparities, and then, movement. Ethan Caldwell stood from the side of the stage, every head turned. Was he here to defend Daniel? "Shut this down." "Silence her." Ava's breath caught. She'd faced cold nights, hunger, rejection, but nothing had prepared her for this moment. Ethan stepped forward, his voice low but clear, picked up by every microphone. "As CEO of Caldwell Enterprises," he began, "I take full responsibility for these failures." The room froze. "I'm not just talking about policy failures," he said. "I'm talking about moral failures." His eyes found Ava's. "Miss Brooks, you have shown us today the kind of courage we claim to value in this company, but rarely recognize." Daniel tried to backpedal. "Mr. Caldwell, this is clearly..." Ethan held up a hand. Daniel Foster is relieved of all duties, effective immediately. Gasps rippled. Photographers snapped pictures. Executives glanced at each other. Some stunned, some pale. We will initiate a full audit of every hiring and promotion process within this company, Ethan continued. Effective tomorrow. He turned to Ava, lowering his voice. And I owe you a conversation. In private. Backstage, chaos erupted in the main hall, but Ava stood alone at a small table, organizing her notes with shaking hands. Ethan approached, slower this time, not as the CEO of a billion-dollar empire, but as a father. And maybe, as a man beginning to see. My son, Liam, he said softly. He asks about you every day. Ava turned. He calls you the scarf lady, Ethan added. Says you wiped his knee with magic. Ava gave a half smile. It was just a handkerchief, Ethan nodded. Maybe, but it changed everything. In the weeks that followed, the empire shook. High-level resignations, public apologies, new board members. Ethan didn't run from the storm, he stood in it. But the eye of that storm was Ava. And as Liam clutched his father's hand watching, the scarf lady speak on television, neither of them knew. The real transformation had only just begun. 6 months after the conference that shook the corporate world, Forbes magazine featured a headline that no one could have predicted a year earlier. The Handkerchief Project. How a homeless woman rebuilt a fortune, and its soul. On the cover stood Ava Brooks, now Director of Social Impact at Caldwell Enterprises, standing shoulder to shoulder with Ethan Caldwell in front of a new housing and job training facility. The very ground they stood on was once a shelter Ava had been evicted from. Now it was a place of new beginnings. The initiative, named Project Handkerchief by Liam Caldwell, Ethan's son, had already helped over 200 individuals transition out of homelessness, offering them housing, skills training, and employment within the company that had once turned its back on them. And in a small glass display near the entrance sat the original white handkerchief, clean, folded, and framed. The caption read, "The smallest kindness can start the largest change." In an emotional TED Talk that later went viral, Ava shared, "Prejudice doesn't just cost lives. It costs innovation, humanity, potential. When you dismiss someone based on how they look, you don't just erase their story. You rob yourself of being part of their next chapter." Meanwhile, Daniel Foster faced lawsuits from former applicants, internal investigations, and a career in ruins. In a poetic twist of fate, he now searched for jobs using the same broken system he once rigged. Ava didn't celebrate his downfall. That wasn't her victory. Her real win was seeing people once invisible now stand in boardrooms, classrooms, hospitals, places that had once said, "You don't fit." One fall afternoon, while overseeing a new community center's construction, Ava received a message on her phone. "You don't know me, but 3 years ago at a shelter, you gave me the last piece of your sandwich. You said I needed it more than you did. Today, I'm next in line for Project Handkerchief. Thank you for not forgetting people like me, even when the world did." Ava blinked back tears. At home, yes, she had a home now. Ava kept the original handkerchief tucked inside a drawer beside her old resume and journal, not as reminders of what she lost, but of what she reclaimed. Liam, now older, often joined her on visits to training centers. One day he whispered, "When I grow up, I want to help people like you do." She smiled and knelt beside him. "You already do, Liam. You see people others walk past." Behind them, Ethan watched silently, hand over heart. That single moment, when he hesitated to pull Liam away from Ava, had set everything in motion. During a charity gala months later, Ethan shared, "Privilege isn't just what you have, it's what you've never had to think about. I spent decades building walls to protect my fortune when I should have been building bridges to share it." Now he remembered every janitor's name. Ava no longer carried a journal of pain, but a blueprint for change. Liam had learned to share without being told, and maybe that was the real revolution. As the city lights flickered beneath the Manhattan skyline, a quiet truth remained. The most powerful way to bring down an empire is to rebuild it with the kindness it never saw coming. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe for more real-world tales where small acts of courage light the spark for systemic change. Part 2 of Ava's journey, coming soon. Stay tuned. And now, as Ava's story echoes far beyond the skyscrapers of Manhattan, we're left with a choice. We can shake our heads at broken systems, or we can remember. Sometimes, the most radical act is to see someone everyone else has ignored. Ava never shouted. She didn't protest with signs. She handed a crying boy a handkerchief. She stood up, steady and calm, and told the truth no one wanted to hear. And somehow, that was louder than any speech. If this story made your heart ache or made it hopeful, don't just scroll past. Share it. Talk about it. Become the next link in a chain of kindness, because empires don't fall with anger. They transform with love. And sometimes, all it takes to start is a handkerchief. And someone who sees you. Subscribe for more cinematic, true stories of justice, redemption, and people who rise when the world expects them to fall. Drop a comment. What part of Ava's story hit you the hardest?